Couple open wedding gift after 7 years and it changes their marriage. Having to wait 7 years to finally open a wedding gift is unheard of. These days a lot of marriages don't even last that long, but Grandma Iris stood very firm in her demand. Stacy and Thomas would have to wait until she had passed away before they could open her gift, and the couple knew better than to ignore Grandma's wishes. But there turned out to be a very good reason for them having to wait so long. Before we go on, like this video, smash the subscribe button and click the notification bell. Let's proceed with the video. With her hands still shaking and tears welling up in her eyes, Stacy put the phone down. She could barely believe it, but there was no way around it. Grandma Iris had passed away, and the way her mother informed her so matter of fact, like she didn't even care. When she told her husband Thomas about it, he did his very best to be there for her, but it was clear his mind was drifting off, and Stacy knew exactly where it went. The wedding gift they got from Grandma Iris over 7 years ago. It was now finally time to open it up. Thomas brought it downstairs and the couple opened it together. They could not believe their eyes. Now they finally understood why Grandma's Iris had wanted them to wait so long. But to better understand this strange situation, a bit of backstory is required. Stacy Bailey and Thomas Garvey were an unlikely couple. They didn't have much in common, but somehow they had fallen in love almost immediately. After 4 years of dating, Thomas asked Stacy to marry him. She was so excited and couldn't wait to plan her wedding. She tried her best not to think about the past. Even though they'd hit it off right away, Stacy and Thomas had been through a few rough patches. When they moved in together, it took a while for them to adjust to living with someone else. Despite a few arguments, they loved each other deeply and reconciled quickly, but not everyone was happy about their relationship. Stacy's family wasn't pleased to hear about her taking the next step forward with Thomas. It was a major issue within the family, and Stacy often avoided talking to her relatives because of it. They'd hoped that she would eventually settle down with someone else. After all, they had understandable reasons for doubting Thomas. When Thomas was younger, he'd made some poor choices and ended up in trouble. Stacy knew that he'd been arrested and spent some time in juvenile detention. He never talked about it, and she didn't want to push him to tell her more. Stacy's family had always assumed the worst. Ever since being released from juvenile detention, Thomas had been an upstanding member of society. He never got in trouble and always obeyed the law. He explained to Stacy that one of his biggest fears was going back to jail, but no matter how much he tried to leave his crime behind, there was one thing that always reminded him of it again. Stacy's family always brought up Thomas's past and made jokes about his time behind bars. He tried to pretend that it didn't bother him, but it hurt that he could never spend time with Stacy's family without them prying. He knew that Stacy's opinion was the most important, but when it came time to discuss the wedding, Thomas had a plan. Stacy and Thomas decided to plan their wedding themselves without worrying about Stacy's family. They wanted to show her relatives that if they couldn't respectfully celebrate, then Stacy didn't need to involve her family at all. She would plan her wedding with friends. Instead, her family responded in the last way that she ever expected. Stacy's family surprised her by apologizing for their behavior. They wanted to be a part of Stacy's special day, and they promised that they wouldn't bring up Thomas's past at all. Even though Thomas was a little skeptical, she believed them, but there was one person that Stacy was still worried about. Stacy's grandmother Iris always had strong opinions when it came to the family. Stacy hadn't spoken to her for years because her grandmother rarely answered the phone or returned calls. After a while, she'd given up trying to connect, but she knew that her mother often got through, and Stacy was worried that maybe Grandma Iris had heard bad things about Thomas. She knew that she needed to call her immediately. Stacy called Grandma Iris multiple times over the course of a week. She even sent her messages on social media and asked her mother to try to get in touch. But she didn't hear a peep. Figuring that her grandmother was just being strange again, Stacy decided not to think much of it and send her an invitation anyway. It was a decision that meant more than she knew. On the day of the wedding, Stacy was so relieved to see that her relatives were behaving themselves around Thomas. They were smiling and taking pictures instead of cracking jokes or whispering whenever Thomas wasn't around. It seemed like they were going to keep their promise. Still, Stacy couldn't help but notice that Grandma Iris was running late. When the official ceremony started, Stacy suddenly noticed Grandma Iris in the second row at the church. She waved and her grandmother beamed at her. Stacy was so happy that she no longer had her grandmother's absence weighing on her mind. She could focus on Thomas, at least for a moment. After the ceremony, Stacy tried to find her grandmother to say hello, but the older woman wasn't anywhere to be found. She didn't see her when they first arrived at the reception hall either. No matter how many people Stacy asked, no one had any idea where Grandma Iris had gone. Stacy started to wonder if maybe she'd imagined the whole thing. The reception was so much fun, though Stacy was disappointed to learn from her mother that Grandma Iris had left right after the ceremony. When the other guests began to leave, Stacy and Thomas helped pack gifts into Thomas's car. There was one large box in the back. Stacy had no idea that it would change her life forever. When it was time to move the large box, Stacy was confused by an envelope on the front telling the couple that they couldn't open it until Grandma Iris eventually passed away. It seemed like a very odd thing to do, so Stacy tracked down her mother to see if she knew anything about it. She was surprised to hear that she did. Stacy's mother had no idea what was in the box, but she knew that Grandma Iris didn't want them to open it right away. Neither of the women wanted to go against Grandma Iris's wishes, but Stacy was already curious about why she would do such a thing. What could possibly be inside? Stacy and Thomas couldn't stop thinking about the box. Before leaving for their honeymoon, they put the box in the basement where it would be safe and out of sight. But even while they were on vacation, Stacy couldn't stop thinking about what it could be. She was afraid to mention it to Thomas since he didn't seem concerned about it all, but there was something about the box that bothered her. The box began to annoy Stacy so much that she had to avoid thinking about it at night or she wouldn't be able to sleep. She was having the time of her life on her honeymoon, but it felt like every time she had a moment to think, her mind drifted to Grandma Iris's gift. What if it was a prank and her family hadn't kept their promise not to make jokes about Thomas after all? Finally, while they were driving home, Stacy asked Thomas what he really thought about the gift from Grandma Iris. He could tell that something had been weighing on her mind, and he wasn't surprised to hear that it had something to do with the box. After all, he'd been thinking about it too. Thomas had never heard of a present with the connotation that somebody had to die before it could be opened, especially something like a wedding gift, and the fact that he knew so little about Grandma Iris made him question it all even more. Luckily, Stacy could tell him a bit about Iris, even though there were also a lot of question marks left for her. Her mother told her that when she was younger, Iris didn't have an easy time being a mother, and that this left a lot of marks on her personality. Her husband passed away when he was still way too young, leaving Iris to take care of their 3 children on a shoestring budget. But despite the struggle, she always managed to get by. However, nobody was ever allowed to ask her how she did it. Because of this strange secrecy, any wild speculations have been floating around over time, but none have been confirmed or denied by Iris. These range from her stealing the money to her having to beg for the money on the street. When all her kids had finally moved out of the house, she herself moved to a small remote village to be away from everything as much as possible. She needed rest and time to herself. Most of the family saw her about once or twice a year at most from then on. Now that Thomas knew a bit more about Grandma Iris and her life, he started to feel for her a little and respect her a lot. She got dealt a bad hand with a lot of responsibilities and made sure those were all fulfilled before doing what she actually wanted. He had little doubt in his mind about what he wanted to do with the gift. He wanted to respect the wishes of Grandma Iris, as he felt like it was the right thing to do. Stacy eventually agreed, but somewhat reluctantly. She still rather just get it over with and find out now. She still did not fully trust Grandma Iris and feared that the present might not be nice. With all the pranks that her family had pulled on Thomas over the years, she had become really afraid of things like this, but she knew she now had to wait to find out if her suspicions were correct. As the years passed, it became apparent to Stacy and all her family that the wedding between her and Thomas was the last time any of them would see Grandma Iris. She had also moved out from the small village quickly after that day, and nobody knew where. The yearly visits from Grandma got replaced with short calls, of which only purpose felt like they were a reminder that Iris was still alive. But these calls mostly went to Iris's daughters instead of to Stacy or Thomas. They were left mostly in the dark about Iris. Because there was little to no contact and the wedding present from Iris was deeply stashed away in the attic of Stacy and Thomas, they started to forget about it over time. And forget about Iris, they had other things on their mind, like trying to become parents. By now about 7 years had passed since the wedding. Stacy was about 5 months pregnant at this point and extremely happy about it. She and Thomas had tried for almost 3 years before succeeding in getting pregnant, and now it is finally happening. They felt like nothing could ruin their mood and happiness until they suddenly got the call they had been subconsciously dreading and waiting for so long, a call that would probably change their somewhat normal lives so far forever. On the other line, Stacy heard the emotional voice of her mother, who called to inform her that Grandma Iris had passed away. She was admitted to the hospital a couple days prior, and, unknowingly to her family, her condition had quickly worsened. She had passed away in her sleep this morning, after which the hospital called her only contact number, which was Stacy's mother, who in turn started to inform the rest of the family. Stacy was shocked by the news but somewhat unsure about how to feel about it. She had not seen Grandma Iris in 7 years, so didn't feel a strong connection to her whatsoever. But it was still her grandma, and after letting the news sink in, she felt herself become emotional. Thomas quickly came into the room to comfort her and ask what was going on. When Stacy told him Grandma Iris had passed away, she noticed that his mind started to drift off almost immediately. She didn't immediately understand why, but when Thomas quickly shot a look up, it suddenly hit her: the wedding gift. She had completely forgotten all about it. With so much time has passed, Stacy tried to swallow some tears, and she and Thomas quickly went upstairs to finally solve one of the biggest mysteries their marriage had so far. It took them a little bit to actually find the present in the overfull attic, but the red lid on it was unmistakable, and Thomas pulled it out from the rubbish and took it downstairs. Now they were once again face to face with it. The first step, the envelope. They pulled it off the box and opened it up, revealing at first a short letter. The first thing that was written in big bold letters at the top of the letter was "Don't open the box yet," and after that Iris' message for Stacy and Thomas started. The message conveyed that Iris had always believed in their love and blessed their marriage. Stacy was always her favorite grandchild, and Thomas was the first man who married into the family that wasn't a total bore. So Grandma Iris had prepared a special gift for them. In the envelope were 2 plane tickets to the Maldives that could be cashed anytime. There were also tickets for a hotel. Grandma Iris wanted them to go on a second honeymoon to celebrate their love, but she did have 3 conditions for them. The first was that they had to leave within 2 months after getting the news Iris had passed. The second was that they had to take the unopened box with them, and the third was that they had to visit a specific location in the Maldives before leaving. This location would be revealed at the hotel. Stacy and Thomas were completely flabbergasted by all this, but both felt like that by now they were so deep into this they had to find out Grandma Iris her full plan. They both took a week of work that next week and went to the Maldives. The timing could not be better. Despite Stacy being already 5 months pregnant, she was still just about allowed to fly and felt very fit and strong, so they could actually still do a lot of things together now. Before becoming parents, they were looking forward to it, but had no idea what would be waiting for them there. When they arrived in the Maldives with the mysterious till unopened box, they first went to their hotel to check in. The letter had also stated that if they told staff Iris's name, that they would be able to give them the address they needed to visit on their trip. When they tried this, the employee quickly looked something up in the system and was indeed able to give them an address. But that was not all the information he had for them. He was also able to tell them that they were allowed to open the box when they arrived at the address. Stacy and Thomas went immediately after getting this information. They knew they could not enjoy their honeymoon with this mystery still hanging over their head. They didn't even take the time to look up the address and just jumped in a cab. After about 25 minutes of driving, the driver told them that they had arrived. When Stacy got out of the car, her breath stopped for a second when she saw where they were, but she knew immediately why they were there. The driver had brought them to a graveyard. Stacy knew that this had to be Grandma Iris' final resting place. The family had no idea where she was because the hospital staff that informed them had been forbidden from telling them. Why else would they have been brought here? Thomas and Stacy started wandering over the small graveyard looking for Grandma's name, and after a few minutes Thomas called Stacy over from the other side of the yard. He had found Grandma Iris, but it wasn't in the place they would have first expected. Her name was written under a small urn that was placed in one of the nicer display shelves in the graveyard. The whole rest of the display was full except for the place directly next to Iris, her urn, but there was a name under the open space. Stacy's jaw dropped when she read it. It was the name of her grandfather and Iris, her late husband. So many questions started popping up in her head, but then suddenly Stacy had a lightbulb moment and took the wedding gift out of Thomas' hands. It couldn't bear it. She opened the gift and to Thomas his shock another urn came out of the box. The same one Iris her ashes were collected in. It was very tightly wrapped, so it took a while to fully unwrap, but after succeeding, Stacy put it in the empty spot next to Grandma Iris. The couple still had so many questions. Why did they have to take the urn with them? Why did Iris want to be buried here? Why could nobody know? And many more that they would probably never get the answer to. Stacy called her mother as they were leaving the graveyard to tell her everything that had happened. To Stacy's surprise, her mother didn't even seem too shocked. Iris pulled this stunt. That was just how her mother was. She did book a trip to the Maldives herself to pay her final respect, and Stacy and Thomas went on to enjoy their honeymoon. But not a day went by that vacation that they didn't think or discuss Grandma Iris, and she would stay in her thoughts for years to come. What did you think of this story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, like the video and subscribe. See you next time.